Hello and welcome to our webinar today, Big Ideas and Inspiring Careers. It's fantastic to have so many of you joining us today. My name is Preeti Castle. I'm the Strategic Engagement Director at the Western Australian Biodiversity Science Institute, or WABSI for short. We meet today on the land of the Noongar people, so I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians throughout Western Australia and their continuing connection to and deep knowledge of the land and waters. We pay our respects to elders both past and present. If you're joining us for the first time, this webinar is part of a series that we host called Big Issues in Biodiversity Science, and we tackle some of the pressing issues, current and emerging, in the field of biodiversity science. And of course, this is National Science Week in Australia, hence our Big Ideas and Inspiring Careers webinar today celebrates biodiversity science as well. For those of you joining us from outside Australia, National Science Week is an annual celebration around the country celebrating science and technology. So today we've got 4 wonderful panelists doing amazing things in biodiversity science, and I'm sure you'll all be inspired by their stories about their work and their career journeys. So just a quick overview of the format for today. We'll begin with a very quick introduction to the Western Australian Biodiversity Science Institute. I will then introduce the panelists and we'll go straight into our presentations. We absolutely would love to hear your comments and your questions. Please feel free as we progress through this webinar to post your questions, your comments into the chat. Towards the end, after the presentations, we will have about 15 minutes and we will try and address all of your questions. Okay, so just to give you a very quick introduction to WABSI, I know many of you are regular attendees at our webinars, but there are also many of you today who are joining us for the first time, so welcome. So WABSI is an independent mechanism. We facilitate research that's driven by the needs of end users, and by that I mean we undertake consultations with a range of end users from industry, from government, and we identify their knowledge priorities, their knowledge needs, and the themes and topics that emerge from those consultations. They are the basis of the research programs that we develop. We are a joint venture research partnership of 4 WA universities, the WA Museum, CSIRO, and 5 government agencies. Our work is varied. This is just a sample of some of our research programs. There's urban biodiversity, there's environmental data and analytics, weeds, feral cats. So there's a range of work that we do. Okay, I would like to next introduce our panelists. First, we have Rebecca Kua. Rebecca is a graduate zoologist with Stantec. She's also a wildlife ecologist and volunteer, and she's undertaking her PhD at Edith Cowan University. We have Paige Moroney. She's a postdoctoral research fellow at the UWA Deep Sea Centre and research associate at the WA Museum Bulla Bardip. Next, we have Tanaya Duncan. She is a wildlife volunteer and a student ambassador and PhD candidate at Murdoch University. And last but absolutely not least, Caitlin Martin, who's joining us from New Zealand, and she's part of the Inspiring Explorers program and the coordinator of the Antarctic Heritage Trust. So I will stop sharing my screen and hand over to you, Rebecca.
Hi, yeah, thanks for the introduction, Preeti. Is everyone able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Cool. So I guess I'll start off with how I landed up in this field.
Is that better? Can participants, are you able to see back slides? Excellent, thank you. Sorry, Rebecca, please continue.
That's okay. Yeah, so when it came to year 12, I wasn't very sure what I was going to do. Um, I applied for degrees that I thought would stereotypically appease my Asian family. So that included things like law and healthcare. And in the end, it was my mom who talked sense into me and told me to pursue something I was genuinely interested in. Uh, and after having a better scout of what degrees were available at uni, I decided to study conservation and wildlife biology at Murdoch University. And down the road, I added animal health and molecular biology to my list of majors and minors. So during this time, I also supplemented my degree with lots of volunteering and internships with various organizations like DBCA and Conservation Volunteers Australia. And I worked on a range of projects, including flora, fauna, marine, and terrestrial projects, in order to get a better idea of what I was interested in and to get that hands-on experience that a lot of employers are looking for. And after I finished my undergrad, I landed a master's project at UWA studying the genetics and population viability of shark-bay mice that were being translocated to Dirk Island. So that's the rodent you see on the right-hand side of the slide. And then between my master's and studying my PhD, I did work full-time at a consultancy, an environmental consultancy, which I'll get into a little more later. But first, I'll talk about why I decided to pursue a PhD. So ironically, I have imposter syndrome to credit because I didn't think I could get as far as a master's degree. So I really just wanted to prove to myself that I could do a PhD if I wanted to. And that funny looking bonnet at the end of it. But truthfully, I did fall in love with my field of work, and I wanted to specialize more in the realm of mammals and translocations. So here I am now at ECU working on a project involving 6 different mammals that includes the Gilbert's potteroo, booties, woylies, quokkas, quenders, and bush rats. So down the bottom of the slide. And the common denominator of these species is that they all eat and poo fungi. So I'm using environmental DNA methods to study the dietary and habitat requirements of these mammals because I hope to be able to inform translocation decisions for some of them. Next slide, please. So as mentioned earlier, I did work full-time at an environmental consultancy known as Stantec between finishing my master's and starting my PhD. And I still do, but now on a casual basis to balance my uni and work commitments. And as a zoologist, I undertook fauna surveys and population monitoring programs across WA, primarily to inform mining companies of the presence of significant fauna in their current or future mining areas, so that they're able to make relevant decisions to work around these habitat areas. And more recently, I've also taken up casual appointments at ECU as a research assistant, where I get to run a long-term quenda monitoring program, and will also be helping with the genetic lab work for the rufous hair wallabies. And seasonally, I also work for DBCA as a technical officer, where I get to lead volunteers into the field to tag and monitor nesting marine turtles. So what I love most about my work is getting to see so much of WA, learning to care for all the species that I never previously knew existed. So they say that you can't care for what you don't know, and that's been true for me. And it's also been really important that the work or research that I do should have a tangible and positive management impact, I guess, in the conservation of wildlife. The biggest challenge I faced so far has been managing burnout. I guess I do really love my field of work, but the line between what I do for fun and what I do for work can sometimes get blurred, so it would be difficult to switch off. I also have trouble saying no to new and exciting projects because I always wonder if an opportunity like that would ever come back again. So I guess I just have to be conscious about about taking on more work, and that is it isn't at the expense of what I have currently going on and also on my own well-being. Yeah. But I've been very fortunate to be able to trial working in a few different sectors. So I guess the next steps in my career is to finish my PhD, continue building my networks, and work out which of these routes will be best for me in the future. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Super interesting, and thank you for your honest assessment of some of the challenges in terms of not being able to say no to all sorts of exciting opportunities. Thank you. Next, we have Paige Moroney. Thank you, Paige.
Mute. Okay, how am I looking? Screen and volume on? Perfect. Okay, so yes, thank you, Preeti, for inviting me and for the introduction. As Preeti mentioned, I work at a deep sea research center. So what you're seeing on the slide right now is what we call a bathymetric map. The kind of stripe through the middle in blue is the higher resolution data, whereas along the sides is data generated by satellite imagery. We in the deep sea lab work with this kind of image a lot. But when I look at this, I see my life. I see highs and lows, troughs, flat zones, rough zones, chaotic zones. And I think it's a really fantastic way to talk about a path in science and my path over the last 10 plus years from when I began my undergraduate degree. It's also quite fantastic. I did this exact same undergraduate degree as Rebecca. So it's just amazing to show you that two same undergraduate degrees at the same university, probably with the same lecturers and demonstrators, has pushed out two academics in completely different spaces. So I think my love for biodiversity initially began because I grew up on a farm in the southwest in the place called South Stirlings, which borders the Stirling Range National Park. I then did my schooling in Albany, which is a small southwest town. So this kind of array of environments going from farming and inland and these mountains with flowers to the coast where had whales and beautiful coastal habitats kind of introduced me to this unique and wonderful state as it is. So then moving to Perth, I knew I wanted to start an undergraduate in biology, but from there, I really did not have a clear understanding of what would be next either. So I kind of entered this unknown pathway zone in undergraduate. Then I started my volunteering at the West Australian Museum. I was working in the entomology department, so I started opening drawer after drawer of 100 different bugs in one drawer, and then 100 different butterflies in the next, 100 different cockroaches in the next. And I think this just immediate realization that not only West Australia is extremely biodiverse and fantastic, but the whole world probably looks like this, really opened my eyes to the fact that I wanted to help this field of science progress, and I wanted to keep learning, and I wanted to understand, why that animal is that color, or why that animal has an appendage that looks like X, but the next one of the same species has an appendage that looks completely different. So I was just really intrigued by this bizarreness of biodiversity in the first place. So that's when I started to work on my honours project, which is a year after an undergraduate degree. Instead of a master's like Rebecca, I did an honours. So this for me was looking at biodiversity in West Australian water bugs or water striders. There are male and females that are sexually dimorphic. So the males will have appendages to grab a hold of and secure a mate of the female, whereas the female has structures that help her avoid unwanted matings by the male. So it was a weird and bizarre project of going into the field with a jar of liquid nitrogen and catching these bugs and conducting mating trials on the side of a river while hikers were walking past having a nice hike and having a nice day. I was trying to freeze bugs mating each other. So yeah, certainly sends you on some strange pathways in the entomology world, but it ended up being a great project. I got to do a lot of different things, so really enjoyed that. And then I started scuba diving and I discovered what nudibranchs were, and I was immediately transformed to, well, maybe converted is probably a better word, converted to the undersea world. I started to see these little sea slugs and see the colors and shapes and sizes, and from then on I was pretty hooked. So I started my PhD investigating biodiversity in Antarctica, specifically looking at Antarctic nudibranchs. And this project also involved a lot of molecular tools, and we were able to discover almost 60 new species of Antarctic nudibranch. And then from there, we were also looking at the chemical diversity of these nudibranchs, because they don't have a shell, they have no way to protect themselves, so they have to make themselves taste really bad, really toxic. But for humans, these toxic compounds are actually really helpful from a synthetic point of view, because we can start to design new drugs that help us with diseases like leukemia and other types of cancer. So really broad PhD, but I certainly loved it. And then from there, that took 3.5 years to complete. And during that time, as I said, life moved in weird and wonderful ways. PhD papers, submitting papers, to getting the reviewer comments back, and having that 2-month-long terror period before you get your PhD comments back, where you're not sure if you're going to pass or fail or major or minor revisions. So it was certainly a wild one. And then I was lucky enough to get a postdoc, which is the kind of next step if you want to continue. Well, one of the next steps, certainly doesn't have to be the next step, but one of the next steps in academia is moving to a postdoc, which I then landed in the Deep Sea Center. So that is where I am now. I am a postdoc. I'm about 3 years into my contract with UWA, and we work in mainly marine systems below 3,000 meters, and we go all the way down to 11,000 meters. And I predominantly work on crustaceans. So these animals right in the middle of the screen are called amphipods, and this species specifically, Alicella gigantea, is a supergiant amphipod. So it can grow to about 40 centimeters, so that's the size of your forearm. And we have found these animals to occur in all of our oceans. So this map on the bottom left-hand corner shows you the black dots are where we have physical samples from or have video footage of the species from. And then we've kind of modeled out across our oceans using a bunch of genetic, but also geological, oceanographic, and biological informative factors to estimate that this one species in the deep sea may occur across almost 60% of our planet. So huge biodiverse, well, not biodiverse, actually. They're one species, but huge range. But then we see this pattern occurring across deep sea amphipods, deep sea fishes, and deep sea prawns, which you can see in the video. The prawn is the red, the fish popping up in the background, that is a rat tail. So these are all really charismatic deep sea fauna. Then on the right, I've just put a phylogenetic tree. So that is another huge part of my job now, is I work with DNA of these animals to be able to generate maps like this one. So I want to understand, are they all related? When did they start to evolve? How have they been evolving since they first begun? And what is happening now? What's next in my career is actually, so where I'm calling you from today is I'm in the Arctic, and I have just completed a month-long research expedition here in the Arctic, trying to assess fjord systems within and between Svalbard, which is owned by Norway, but is within the Arctic Circle. So as you can see, we're operating in a lot of pack ice, which is amazing. And we're using remotely operated vehicles to drive around on the sea floor and conduct biodiversity assessments of Svalbard. Firstly, because almost 80% of all research conducted in this region is based on birds, macroalgae, and geology. So we're trying to generate a baseline of the biodiversity that is within and between fjord systems across Svalbard. And then we plan on applying these methods across all of the Arctic, and then moving into the subantarctic and Antarctic later in this year to try and tackle some kind of under-sampled regions to generate footage like what you can see on the screen now. Actually get some footage of some undiveable sites. So this one is 62 meters, and we're just starting to get further. But we are trying to use really easy tools and working with vessels that are already operating in the regions to build a platform and build a program so anyone can do this. We can do this as a training module, and then local operators can do this as part of their tours, or you can get students sent out, or we can get researchers like myself to go out and conduct these expeditions to give local regions a really good snapshot of different habitats. So these footage is all from just pretty much 20 days of operating, but we did over 22 dives. So we're starting to get some real glimpses of how amazing the polar regions really can be. And with that, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Paige. Wow, I'm sure everyone who's listening is already getting very excited and inspired. What an incredible journey from growing up on a farm to scuba diving to deep sea fauna and all the way to the Arctic. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Next, we have Tanaya Duncan. Over to you, Tanaya.
Thank you. I don't know how I'm going to follow all that amazing footage, but I'll try. Can we all see that all good? I'm going to say silence is a yes. So yeah, my name's T. Going to be very similar to Beck with my presentation, as I am a PhD candidate as well. So why predator ecology and why a PhD? So I originally wanted to be a zookeeper for majority of my younger years. And I had no interest in university or doing anything else. I just thought zookeeping with elephants is my goal, that's it. But every zookeeper I spoke to, they always said, if you want to work in a zoo, you need to start volunteering and getting experience with animals or wildlife. So at 15, I started volunteering at a wildlife park in Geraldton, and I fell in love with the dingoes there. So that was my pathway into predators. I thought every predator is so unique and adapted and evolved so differently depending on the niche that they fill. And I thought that was just really interesting, and there's just such amazing things in the landscape. So I did my undergraduate degree at UWA in conservation and zoology. I then followed through to do an honours degree, very much like Paige, at Murdoch University in the diet of the dingo in the West Kimberley. So I spent a year sieving through dingo poo to figure out what they're eating, which wasn't very nice smelling, to say the least. And from there, I thought, yeah, I'm a little bit too stupid for a PhD. I didn't think I was capable of doing it. So I tried to get a job for about a year and a half, but being post-COVID, it was quite difficult. So a bunch of looking around, but I was very lucky that my supervisor from my honours reached out to me with a PhD project, and she knew I couldn't say no to it. So it was a really great project where I was able to look at predators. So I look at an invasive predator, such as a feral cat, and how we can mitigate their impacts on our wildlife. So I look at whether artificial refuges, so human-made materials such as pellets, corrugated iron, how we can use them for small mammals and reptiles in the landscape to reduce feral cat predation. And what my job involves with my PhD, a lot. With your PhD, you're pretty much in charge of everything. So I'm the project manager, I'm the project coordinator, I'm the field tech, I'm the lab tech, I'm the analyst, I'm everything, but I absolutely love it. So I'm really lucky to be working with Bush Heritage Australia. So I work in the Midwest region of WA. So I get to go to Kalbarri and Shark Bay regions for work. And it's a lot of early mornings, late nights with experiments, a lot of camera trap footage that I go through, which you can see on the image here. So I get to do a lot of field work, which is amazing, but I also get to stay in the office and go through all the data and that as well. Like Beck, I also have other casual jobs within my PhD to help, again, support myself. So I'm also a zoologist for an environmental consultancy, and thanks for the intro, Beck, that was amazing. But I work with Spectrum, so just a different consultancy, and I'm basically their little minion. So I just go out in the field for them. I do surveys and monitoring programs. Plug in for predators. So those two little mammals on the left side, they're actually very small predators. They're carnivorous marsupials or dasyurids, which I think are the cutest little things. They're about the size of a mouse, maybe smaller, but have got a bunch of attitude to them. They're amazing. I'm also a technical officer for DPIRD, so Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, a really long-winded way of saying Department of Ag and Fisheries. So again, I help with field work where I can, but mostly I do more of the office stuff for them. So they work on dogs or feral dogs, feral pigs and deer. So I go through their camera trap footage, I process their data, I upload their data. At the moment, I'm currently going through video footage. So one of the researchers put cameras on one of the collars of guardian dogs up in the Pilbara. So I'm going through that footage to see what the dogs are doing up there. And lastly, I also work for Murdoch. So I also am a demonstrator, so a lab demonstrator. I teach first year vet students introduction to the animal body, and that's because of my zoology degree back in undergrad. So it's a lot of working with skulls and dissections and teaching students how the stomach works in different animals and the lungs and hearts and so on. But I'm also a student ambassador, and this is a really rewarding job. So we're part of the outreach team. So I develop a lot of workshops in ecology or the environmental science. I go to schools, we communicate different areas of what university is, what the field is, but also we're just mainly a friendly face for students to ask about what to do after high school or where they can go with their lives. We also push TAFE as well as university, so we're not Murdoch only. We try and encourage students as best as we can to what they want to do. So outside of my paid job, I'm also a wildlife rehabilitator. So this is predominantly volunteering. And I've volunteered at probably most of the centres here in Perth. So I work at Carrican mostly now, which we work with wild black cockatoos. So we help rehabilitate and release them back into the wild. But I've also worked at Aussie's Bird of Prey, Kenyana and Darling Range. And I've been a wildlife rehabilitator for 8 years now, and it's a very valuable skill in this industry. When you're trying to find work, a lot of the time they want you to have experience with animals. This is where I got all my experience with animal handling and gained my confidence. So I could hold a wedge-tailed eagle all the way down to a little New Holland honeyeater, and that's all because of wildlife rehab. But it also gives you a really good knowledge for animal health. So when we're out in the field, we're out in the middle of the bush, we're working with wildlife, having that animal health understanding as to when an animal is injured or stressed or scared, knowing the process on how to help that animal is really helpful in the field. So I recently came back from a trip from the Pilbara, and we came across an orphan joey, and I was the only one on the team that knew how to care for that animal. So as much as wildlife rehabilitation is a volunteering role, it's very transferable skills in this industry for sure. Biggest challenges, I have two. If you're a little bit scared of blood, I recommend looking away now, because the biggest challenge is not getting bit by things. So on the left, the two little bite marks, that's a very lucky near miss from a Tassie devil. They've got the strongest bite force for their size, so I'm very lucky it didn't go all the way through. And then the other two are from black cockatoos. So as much as, so ecologists have bucket lists, right? We all have things that we want to look at or work with in the field. I have a really weird bucket list of getting bit by as many things as I can. Now, I don't go out searching for those bites, but sometimes when you're so busy, your finger misses and you just get gnawed on. But sometimes bites can be quite cute. So hopefully this video plays. Yep. So this is a little striped-faced dunner who's trying his absolute hardest to bite some meat off my finger, but then he apologizes and gives me kisses. So sometimes the bites don't hurt. These guys have a really weak bite force, so I couldn't really feel anything. My second biggest challenge is imposter syndrome. So very much like what Beck said earlier. And it's basically my inner saboteur telling me I'm not good enough for this industry or I'm not capable of it. But at the end of the day, you've got to remember, if we knew everything about this industry, there would be no point of us researching it. We want to know how we can help species. We want to know how we can mitigate impacts. And the whole point of that is through learning. And when you're in your early stages of your career, that's fine. We're constantly learning with this industry, and that's the best part about it. And the industry is very collaborative. So if you're stuck, there's always someone in another lab or another industry that can help you along the way. So imposter syndrome is really hard, but it's something that you get over with in time. You can have your moment, have your little feel bad, but then you just get up and keep going, because it's an amazing industry where a lot of people help and support each other. What's next for me? Passing my PhD. I'm about a year left from submission, so just surviving that. But after this, I would really love to go into working with dasyurids, so those small little dudes that you saw earlier, or to Tasmania working on devils. But I'm also interested in biosecurity. So the biggest thing next is figuring out what I want to do, because it's so many options out there, and it's a really fun journey to be on. So yeah, if anyone wants to discuss anything about this or zookeeping and that, I'm more than happy to talk later. But that's it from me.
Wow, thank you so much, Tanaya. Wow, that's a very action-packed presentation. And everyone who is online with us, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts and questions around how to pack volunteering and wearing multiple hats and jobs in PhD. So please feel free to pop your comments and questions in the chat. I really loved the honesty again tonight in terms of that early decision making around wanting to do hands-on work within biodiversity science, but not necessarily convinced about the study aspect, and then undertaking that and progressing in that journey. And I'm sure that's really helpful for many of our participants listening today. Thank you so much again. Next, we have Caitlin Martin. Caitlin, over to you.
Good, everyone. I'm actually talking to you. So I live in Christchurch, and I work for the Antarctic Heritage Trust. And so we are typically based in Christchurch, but we are in Wellington. So I'm calling you from Wellington today for a big event that we had here yesterday. So this is my first slide. We had a bit of a laugh about this compared to the other ones, but this slide actually summarizes my entire PhD experience of why I did it and what sort of came out of it. So it's a photo that I absolutely love. So I, like many of the other wonderful presenters that we have today, I got started studying. I studied biology at university. I honestly can't really tell you why. I started off studying chemistry, so I thought that would be quite useful. And I took a biology class and just thought, well, that's fascinating. I better do more of that. And I think really what happened to me is that as I started learning more science and hearing about these topics from people that were really passionate about them, I kind of became aware of how important those stories were, and that those stories it was important to get those out to people. So it was my first sort of experience, again, volunteering like many of the others at university, doing things like science communication. So that's sort of the angle that I started taking, even though I was doing kind of a biology degree. So I started doing things like volunteering at science festivals, volunteering at science events at libraries, and then kind of thought, oh, well, I think I might want to become a teacher. So I got my teaching degree. But that whole experience sort of in the classroom is actually very similar to what Tanaya was saying about kind of knowing that you want to be in that space, but maybe I didn't want to be in the classroom all the time. And I had seen that there were all these really fantastic stories about science that sort of weren't getting out there into schools and to the people that needed them, that could be really kind of inspired by them. So that's actually why I came to New Zealand. That was 8 years ago. And I studied at the University of Otago down in Dunedin, just way down south at the bottom of New Zealand, at the Science Communication Department. So it was really at the time one of the only places in the world where you could study science communication. And the whole purpose was to try to find ways to connect young people with science. So try to kind of tease apart why were we kind of losing so many young people sort of losing their interest in science. So the project that we did was, there was a lot of documentary filmmaking in my department. So sort of your big sort of David Attenborough type documentaries getting made. I do not know how to make those sorts of big documentaries, but I knew lots about working with young people. And so the project idea that we had for my PhD was around getting young people to make their own documentaries. And so we called it mobile filmmaking. So this was sort of making science documentaries on mobile devices. And so what you're actually seeing in this photo is from one of the schools that did this project. And the particular boys in this group, these were ones that in their interviews sort of before the project started, they told me that they hated science class, that they thought it was extremely boring, that they never wanted to do science. And I just said, okay. And I just, kind of took my notes and, didn't try to convince them of anything. And so we got this project started where they were going to be making the films. And this was on the second day when most of the other groups were still sort of in the planning phase. And the only prompt that they had gotten was that they were starting a unit on climate change and sort of weather. And the teacher wanted them to kind of make a video about climate change and weather. And so this is the second day. Everyone else was still planning their videos, and these guys had come in. They'd figured out their own devices to bring in, their own apps that they had to get. They brought all these materials you can see in the background, the green sheets and stuff, to make a green screen. And so you can see in the video, he's actually green screening his face onto the body of a penguin. And that is because they're giving a weather report from the perspective of endangered animals, right? How incredibly creative, how amazing the way that they're kind of connecting with that just a simple prompt. And so for me, this was kind of the snapshot of, what can happen if you sort of look at science differently and kind of connect people with those stories that it has to tell. So that's what I did for my PhD. Since then, I've kind of done lots of different things. I've always wanted to straddle sort of doing a bit of science and communicating that science as well. So at the moment, my job is that I am, down to my slides, is that I am the Inspiring Explorers Program Coordinator for the Antarctic Heritage Trust. It's a big mouthful. But the bottom line is that we get to do cool stuff in Antarctica. So the trust, that word heritage just means that we really like old stuff and we take care of lots of old stuff. So most of the stuff that we take care of are the really old sort of original explorer bases down in Antarctica. We take care of all the artifacts, and so it's a lot of sort of archaeology and things like that. But then we also, the way that we kind of talk about it is that we conserve the legacy of exploration. So we're conserving those old buildings, we're taking care of all of those artifacts, but we also kind of want to conserve the spirit of exploration. And that's where I get to come in with my job, which is a lot of helping young people to explore and sort of set up these experiences where, they get to go on expeditions to some amazing places. So in the top left corner there, you have an example of some of our Young Inspiring Explorers programs. These are students that get to apply and come down to Christchurch for a weekend of learning about Antarctica and history and challenges and sort of all about exploration. In the bottom left corner, again, another team that I've been extremely proud of, and they are, this is a group of 22 inspiring explorers. So we run pretty much one large expedition every year to somewhere in or around Antarctica. And this is for sort of 18 to 35-year-olds. And if you really want more information, we're actually launching our next expedition in a couple weeks. So I can tell you about that. But this was our last team, and it was a team that I actually got to be part of and go to South Georgia with them last year. And just a really incredible experience to see the way that this is sort of not only shaped their careers coming out of it. You had lots of different people in all different sorts of fields, but the way that sort of an experience with such a raw place like South Georgia, which is a subantarctic island, how that sort of impacted anyone that was going there. I've carried on doing still a bit of technology, part of my job that's really fun. So on South Georgia, you can see in that photo in the middle, we've got a king penguin there that looks like it's about to bite the camera, and that is because it 100% did bite the camera. we got to do some really cool footage and video recording there on South Georgia of the wildlife, and most of the cameras survived the experience. So what are some of the joys of my job? I think that I absolutely love getting to work with people. I think early on that was kind of something that fascinated me. I really wanted to connect people with science, and with the kind of programs that I get to do as a science communicator, I get to connect people with science all the time. And it's to me, so many of the things that we do are kind of really tied to the people that we're getting to do them with. And so, yeah, it's a really, really special part of it for me. Big challenge, kind of like others have said kind of similar things. I think there's just so much that can be exciting. There's so many cool projects. There's so many, as you do more and you get very excited about things, more people want to work with you and you want to try something new. And I think sometimes a big challenge for me is trying to sort of focus in and do some things really well, and kind of focus your energy. I think that's probably the big challenge for me. What's going on next? I'm still kind of staying in this space. I think I have really I want to focus on experiences and the way that sort of experience plays in the different things that we learn. And so I can show you some of and I actually just added this in because everybody else had cool videos. So I wanted to add a cool video to mine. So while you guys were talking, I added this. So some of the cool experiences here in New Zealand, we have a ship called the Spirit of New Zealand. This is a ship, it's like a sailing pirate ship. And this one, we bring 40 young people on the ship and you're teaching them to sail. So again, you might kind of go like, oh, like, where's the science and that sort of thing? But there's a heap of science going on, and it's an incredibly rich experience to sort of explore lots of different things about nature and the world. So yeah, doing lots of different cool things along with that. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. And who doesn't want to go on a pirate ship? I think I think you can have lots of people wanting to put their hand up to go on the ship, and possibly the next expedition as well. Thank you to all our presenters. Just absolutely fascinating to see there's so many diverse pathways. Rebecca, you spoke in your presentation around the value of internships. Do you have any advice for those listening in terms of how to go about navigating that field of how to begin to apply for an internship? There aren't always the big formal programs in many organizations. So what advice would you have for somebody embarking on that journey?
Yeah, I guess there are a few different ways to go about it. How I did it was Murdoch University had a unit for us dedicated to internships. So I went through that process and submitted my resume and application through that program and ended up with an internship with Conservation Volunteers Australia. I know a lot of different organizations, consultancies also take on interns, and that could just be a matter of just reaching out to people you know, or just, yeah, cold sending in your resume and, yeah, send an email in expressing your interest in getting experience. That would be my advice.
We did have a question, thank you, from our participants from Victoria, wondering about volunteer opportunities. And I'm hoping Rebecca's response has helped you to think about what you can do in your area. I'm wondering if you've got some advice. This is, I guess, to any of our panelists. You all spoke about perhaps at undergraduate level and even before that, not really knowing which direction to take, whether it was chemistry, as you said, Caitlin, or whether it was biology, and tonight, whether it was even university. What advice would you have for somebody perhaps embarking on the university or TAFE journey, or are currently in a year or two in and thinking about postgraduate or PhD, but feeling a little overwhelmed about, is this for me? And it just seems so massive, and look at all these clever people. Is that for me? What advice would you have?
I can jump in there for some hopefully good advice. I actually still use it if I'm ever kind of looking to apply for something, and I'm not exactly sure that it's going to be within my wheelhouse, but or if I'm kind of thinking about maybe moving in a different direction with something, is that I kind of, even if I'm not like actively looking for a new job or something like that, just sort of having a look at jobs that I might find interesting. Or might be kind of in the direction that I want to go, and start looking at the kinds of qualifications that, and whether those are kind of like, degrees or sort of experience, that you have like a certain type of coding skill or something like that. And I just kind of look at those, even if I'm not actively pursuing them, as a way of like, oh, maybe I could develop my coding, or oh, maybe I should actually develop, how to use this particular image editing software or something like that. It kind of starts to get your foot in the door a little bit of, what are they actually looking for when they say, this is the kind of job that I want. Yeah, I'd say that's been quite helpful for me, because I think sometimes we can think about or kind of see a degree and go, oh, that sounds really cool, but not really knowing where it might take you in the future. The other one, and this got told to me as well when I was going through, is that, and I think somebody else said this as well, is kind of doing something you're really excited about and doing it well. Because I actually did evolutionary biology, kind of a lot of the stuff that Paige was talking about for my undergrad, and I hardly ever talk about that anymore, but I absolutely loved it when I was going through. And I think when I came out of that, I talked about it really well. It made me really stick with it, maybe kind of do well. And that sort of helped whatever came next. Even if it was in a different field, they could see that I was really passionate about something, which is good.
I might add some stuff as well. I find from the earlier stages, going out and trying it. So for me, it was volunteering the whole time, and I thought I wanted to do zookeeping, and it wasn't until I actually was volunteering and doing remotely what I was interested that I figured out actually that's what I want to do. And it's talking to people as well. So for me, it wasn't, Steve Irwin or David Attenborough that actually inspired me. It was the owner of the wildlife park. Her passion really inspired me. So going out and talking to people in the area is really helpful, and going to university open days and talking to the academics and talking to the students there is really helpful. And one advice I really like to give is they generally give you like a booklet of all the courses that they offer. And what's really fun is what you don't like. If you're someone that knows you're never going to do nursing, or you're never going to do drawing, go through with a big, thick, black permanent marker and cross out everything that you don't like. And going through the booklets is less intimidating when you've got most of it crossed out. And then you can color code it with, okay, I'm kind of interested in that, so to go explore that further and look at jobs in yellow. If you know that's what you really like, highlight it in green. So talking to people and going to open days or TAFE days is really helpful, and I found that probably the most helpful for me is talking to people.
Thank you. So we have a question around how balancing workload involved with study and work and volunteering, and you all clearly have done that all the way through in your career and continue to do it. What advice would you have about how to best do that? Or is that the $1 million question?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the $1 million question. I'm not sure any of us would say that we've figured it out. But I think definitely if I'm thinking about like the phase when I was going through my PhD, to some extent, it's just keep an eye on yourself as far as the balance goes. But I think something that really helped for me, especially around volunteering, and with what I do, it's not quite so subject specific, but I found a volunteering opportunity that I kind of felt was like it was almost like a well-being activity for me anyway. So I was really I'm really into astronomy, so I'd volunteer at the local observatory, which really kind of, I look back at it now, and it was years and years of doing lots of science communication. It's kind of where I like cut my chops a little bit and got really used to presenting. But it was also just, I loved going out and looking at the stars. And so that could kind of almost be like an unwinding thing, even though I was technically working, and now I can put it on my CV as like this great experience. It was something that was really kind of relaxing for me. So that definitely helped amongst, you know, everything else was still busy, but at least there was that.
Rebecca, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I guess for me, it's still just learning how to say no to things, weighing out what I get from each opportunity, and just, yeah, knowing that it's okay to say no and opportunities will come back around as long as you keep building your networks. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic. Well, we are coming to towards the close of the webinar. Before we wrap up, I would just like to ask our participants to please provide us with some feedback. We would love your comments and thoughts so we can ensure we put on another session which is relevant and informative and engaging. Thank you very much for joining us. If you would like to join us for our next couple of webinars, our next one is in October, and that's around measuring nature and biodiversity. You can also jump onto our website. It showcases all of the programs that we work across. And if you go to the news section, it also lists our upcoming webinars. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you very much to all our panelists. We really appreciate you sharing your insights. And for participants, if you wanted to connect with any of our panelists, or if you have any questions that you perhaps think about or think of later down the track, please feel free to email us info@wabsi.org.au, and we will pass them on and endeavour to get them answered. Thank you very much once again to everyone who joined us today, and thanks again to our panelists, Rebecca, Paige, Tanaya, and Caitlin. And with that, I think that's a wrap. Thank you very much.